The slap echoed across Prescott Trading Post like a gunshot. December 15th, 1884, Arizona Territory. The air tasted of snow and iron. 30 people stood watching, their breath fogging in the bitter cold, their eyes wide, but their feet frozen. Not one of them moved. Not one of them spoke. John Broken Arrow stood over the woman like a wolf over prey, his fist clenched, his face twisted with a rage that had long ago stopped needing reasons. The woman on the ground, small and trembling, wore a dress patched more times than cloth should survive. Around her neck a collar of iron, not metaphor, not symbol, real iron with a chain that dragged in the snow behind her like a leash. Her name was Issei, White Dove to those who remembered her mother. But no one called her that anymore. No one called her anything. 6 years of marriage had beaten the name out of her, replaced it with silence, with fear, with the knowledge that speaking only brought more pain. Blood trickled from her split lip. She did not wipe it away. She had learned that moving too soon only invited another blow, so she stayed there, kneeling in the snow, her hands pressed into the frozen earth, her head bowed. The collar bit into her neck. The cold burned her skin. But worse than any of that was the knowing that this would happen again tomorrow, and the day after, and every day until one of them died. John's voice cut through the silence like a blade. 6 years, and you give me nothing. No son, no daughter. You are useless. He raised his hand again. The crowd flinched. Issei closed her eyes. She did not beg. Begging had stopped working 3 years ago, but the blow never came. A hand caught John's wrist, mid-swing, strong, steady, unyielding. Enough. The voice belonged to a man who had just stepped out of the saloon, tall, late 30s, with a face carved by wind and loss. His coat hung loose on shoulders that had once carried more weight, both physical and otherwise. His eyes, gray as winter storm clouds, held no anger, only something colder, something more dangerous. Certainty. His name was Ethan Coulter. He owned a ranch 20 miles north. He came to Prescott once a month for supplies and whiskey, though he had stopped drinking the whiskey 2 years ago. Most days he wished he could start again. Most days he wished for a lot of things that no longer mattered. Today he wished for none of that. Today he looked at the woman in the snow and saw something he could not ignore. John spun fury, redirecting like wildfire, finding new kindling. Stay out of this, Coulter. She is my wife, my property. Ethan's hand did not release. His grip tightened instead. Bone ground against bone. John winced. She is a human being. 4 words, spoken quietly. But they carried weight that silence could not hold. John tried to jerk free, failed. His other hand moved to his belt, to the pistol tucked there. Ethan was faster. His own gun cleared leather before John's fingers even touched metal. The barrel pressed cold against John's forehead. The click of the hammer sounded like the closing of a door or the opening of one. The crowd gasped. Someone whispered a prayer. Reverend Harlan Shaw, who had lost his son to Apache raids 12 years ago and never forgiven, stepped forward with hands raised. Coulter, do not defend that savage. You know what her people did. You were there. Ethan did not look away from John. His voice remained level. I know what war does. I know what hate does, and I know this is not war. This is cruelty. He lowered the gun slightly, just enough, just so it no longer touched flesh. But it stayed ready, stayed close. How much? John blinked. Confusion cracked through his rage. What? How much for her? You want money. I have money. Name your price. The crowd murmured. This was not how things were done. This was not proper. But proper had long ago left Prescott behind, buried somewhere between the war and the winter and the weight of too many ghosts. John's eyes narrowed. Calculation replaced rage. He was drunk, yes. He was cruel, yes. But he was not stupid. He saw opportunity. $50. Gasps. That was a fortune. That was 3 months' wages for a working man. That was impossible. Ethan reached into his coat, pulled out a leather pouch, counted bills and coins with steady hands. $47. He emptied his pockets, found 2 more, searched his vest. 1 more, 50 exactly. Every cent he had brought to town, every cent he had in the world, save for what remained buried in a jar beneath his kitchen floorboards. He threw the money at John's feet. It scattered in the snow like seeds on barren ground. She is mine now. You touch her again, I kill you. We clear. John stared at the money, stared at Ethan. Hatred burned in his eyes, but greed burned brighter. He bent. gathered the bills and coins with trembling fingers. When he stood, he spat in the snow at Issei's feet. "Take the barren bitch. She is worth less than that collar." He walked away. Stumbled, really. The crowd parted for him like water around stone. When he disappeared into the saloon, the tension eased, but did not break. Ethan holstered his gun, knelt beside Issei. She had not moved, had not looked up, had not, as far as he could tell, even breathed. "Ma'am," his voice gentled, "may I remove that collar?" She flinched at the word ma'am, as if kindness hurt worse than cruelty, as if being treated like a person felt like mockery after so long being treated like property. But slowly, so slowly it seemed to take years, she nodded. Ethan examined the collar, iron rusted at the hinges with a lock that had long ago seized shut. He pulled a knife from his boot, worked the blade into the mechanism, twisted. The lock snapped. The collar fell away. Where it had rested, her skin was raw, red and bleeding, scarred from months, maybe years of constant chafing. Ethan's jaw tightened. He wanted to go back into that saloon, wanted to drag John out by his hair, wanted to make him answer for every mark, every scar, every moment of suffering written into this woman's flesh. But revenge could wait. Right now, she needed safety, needed warmth, needed someone to not hurt her. He stood, offered his hand. She stared at it like it might be a trap, like kindness might be the cruelest trick of all. But eventually, with a hesitation that broke something in Ethan's chest, she placed her hand in his. Her fingers were ice. Her palm was calloused. Her grip was so light it felt like holding air. He helped her to her feet. She swayed. He steadied her. She pulled back. He let go immediately, gave her space, gave her choice. "My name is Ethan. You are safe now." She said nothing, just stood there, shaking, blood freezing on her lip, hope and terror warring in her eyes. He gestured toward his wagon. She followed. The crowd watched, some with approval, some with disgust. Reverend Shaw with something that might have been pity or might have been contempt. Hard to tell with men like him. Ethan helped Issei onto the wagon seat, climbed up beside her, took the reins. The horse, an old gelding named Ash, knew the way home. 20 miles north. 20 miles through snow that had started falling harder, through wind that had started cutting deeper, through a world that had suddenly become far more complicated than it had been an hour ago. As they left Prescott behind, Ethan glanced at the woman beside him. She sat rigid, hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on nothing. He wanted to say something, wanted to promise her that everything would be all right. But he had learned long ago that some promises could not be kept. Some wounds ran too deep for words to reach. So he said nothing, just drove, just let the silence sit between them like a third passenger, just wondered what in God's name he had just done. But even as he wondered, even as doubt crept in, he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He would not regret this. Whatever came next, whatever trouble followed, whatever price he had to pay, he would not regret saving her. Behind them, unnoticed, a figure stood in the doorway of the saloon. John Broken Arrow, watching them leave. The money was already gone, spent on whiskey and cards, but the rage remained, the hatred remained, and beneath it all something colder, something patient. He would get her back. He would get the land she had inherited from her dead Apache mother. 160 acres, rich soil, richer still in what lay beneath. Gold. Not much, but enough. Enough to kill for. The ranch appeared through the snow like a ghost materializing from memory. A small house, 2 rooms, and a loft. A barn large enough for 3 horses and a cow. A chicken coop that had not held chickens in 2 years. Fences that sagged. Paint that peeled. The look of a place where a man had stopped caring. Ethan pulled the wagon to a stop, climbed down, offered his hand again. This time, Issei took it with slightly less hesitation. Progress. Small. But something. Inside the house was cold. Not as cold as outside, but close. Ethan moved to the stove. Built a fire with practiced efficiency. Flames caught. Warmth began to spread. He filled a kettle, set it to boil, found clean cloths, set them on the table. Issei stood by the door, had not moved since entering. Her eyes darted around the room like a trapped animal seeking escape routes. Ethan understood. Trust was not given freely by those who had been betrayed by it too many times. "There is a room there." He pointed to a door on the left. "It was meant for guests. No one has used it in 5 years. It is yours now. The bed is made. There are blankets. You can lock the door if you wish." Her eyes widened slightly at that last part. A lock. control, safety. I will sleep in the barn loft. The stove will keep this room warm through the night. There is food in the pantry, bread, dried meat. Help yourself to anything. You are not a prisoner here. You are not property. You are a guest. And you are safe. He picked up the kettle, poured hot water into a basin, set it on the table with the cloths. For your wounds, I will leave you to tend them yourself. He moved toward the door, stopped, turned back. She was watching him now, really watching him, searching his face for lies, for traps, for the inevitable moment when kindness would drop its mask and reveal the monster beneath. He met her gaze, held it, let her see whatever she needed to see. My wife died 5 years ago. Her name was Sarah. We had no children. I have lived alone since then. I am not a good man, but I am not a cruel one, and I will not harm you, ever. You have my word. He left before she could respond, before he could see whether his words meant anything at all. The barn was cold, the loft was colder, but he had slept in worse, had survived worse, would survive this too. He lay on the straw coat pulled tight and stared at the ceiling. Through gaps in the boards he could see the house, could see lamplight glowing in the guest room window, could see a shadow moving, alive, free, safe. For the first time in 5 years, his house held life other than his own. For the first time in 5 years, he felt something other than emptiness. Purpose. That was what it was. Purpose. Sleep did not come easy, but when it did, it brought dreams. Dreams of the past. Dreams of the woman whose name he had spoken aloud for the first time in months. Sarah. He was 29. Fort Grant, Arizona, 1874. The war with the Apache was winding down, though no one admitted it yet. Ethan was cavalry, good at it, too good. He had a talent for killing that made officers notice and enemies fear, but he also had a conscience that made sleep difficult and mirrors impossible. She was a nurse, Sarah McKenna, Irish descent, red hair that caught sunlight like fire, green eyes that saw straight through whatever mask a man wore. She was 3 years younger than him, 3 inches shorter, and about 1,000 times braver. Their first meeting was not romantic. He had been shot, not seriously, a graze along the ribs, but it bled enough to require stitching. She did not flinch at the blood, did not shy from the wound, just cleaned and stitched and bandaged with hands that knew their work. You are lucky, she said. An inch to the left and you would be dead. Luck is all I have left, he replied. She smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was knowing. Sad. Then you are richer than most. 3 months later, they married. Small ceremony, no family. His were dead. Hers were back east and had disowned her for moving west. Just them and a chaplain and a promise spoken under a sky so blue it hurt to look at. 5 years of marriage. 5 years of happiness stolen from a world that did not often give it freely. They talked about children, planned for them. But Sarah's body had other ideas. 2 miscarriages in 3 years. Each one took something from her. Each one carved a piece of grief into both their hearts. But they endured. They loved. They built a life from nothing and made it mean something, until the cough started. 1878, 4 years into marriage, a cough that would not quit, that grew worse instead of better. That brought blood with it. The doctor confirmed what they both already knew. Consumption, tuberculosis, the White Plague, no cure, no hope, just time measured in months if they were lucky, weeks if they were not lucky. Sarah wasted away like snow in spring. Beautiful, one moment gone, the next. Her hair lost its fire, her eyes lost their light. Her hands, once so steady, trembled when she tried to hold his. The last night she could barely speak. But she tried. God, she tried. Promise me something. Anything. Live. Do not die with me. Live. Sarah. Promise me, Ethan. Find something to live for. Find someone. Find purpose. Just do not stop. Please, do not stop. He promised. He lied. He held her, until her breathing slowed, until it stopped. Until she was gone and he was alone, and the world was a hollow place that echoed with absence. 5 years. 5 years of keeping that promise and breaking it at the same time. He lived, yes, but barely. He worked the ranch. He ate when he remembered. He slept when exhaustion forced it. But he did not find purpose, did not find meaning, did not find anything worth the effort of looking. Until today. Until a woman in a collar. Until a choice made without thinking. Until purpose found him instead. Ethan woke to a gray dawn light filtering through the barn, cold, stiff, alone. For a moment he thought yesterday had been a dream, a fever vision brought on by too much solitude and too little sleep. But then he looked toward the house, saw smoke rising from the chimney, smelled something cooking, bread maybe, or stew. He stood, brushed straw from his coat, walked to the house, opened the door quietly. Inside the fire burned low, but steady. The smell was stronger here. Stew, yes. Made from the dried meat and vegetables he kept in the pantry. Simple. But the scent filled the room with warmth that had nothing to do with temperature. Issei stood by the stove. She had found one of Sarah's old dresses. It fit poorly, too big in some places, too tight in others, but it was clean, whole, and she wore it like armor. She heard him enter, turned. Her face was guarded, but not as much as before. The raw terror had dulled slightly, replaced by exhaustion and something else. Something that might with time and patience become trust. "I made food," she said. Her voice was quiet, rough from disuse. Each word seemed to cost her something. "Thank you," Ethan replied. He sat at the table. She ladled stew into a bowl, set it in front of him. Did not make one for herself. "Aren't you eating?" She hesitated, as if eating in front of him might be presumptuous, might be overstepping some invisible boundary. "You are allowed to eat," he said gently. "You are allowed to do anything you want. This is your home now, for as long as you need it." She studied him, searching again, looking for the lie, looking for the trap. But eventually, slowly, she ladled stew for herself, sat across from him. They ate in silence. It was not comfortable. Not yet. But it was not hostile either. After Ethan stood, carried his bowl to the basin, turned to find her watching him. "What is your name?" he asked. "Your real name, not the one he called you." Her throat worked, swallowing words that wanted to stay buried. "Issei. My mother called me Issei. It means girl, in Apache. Issei." He repeated it carefully, with respect. "It is a good name." For the first time since meeting her, he saw something other than fear in her eyes, something small, fragile, a spark. Gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded, left to tend the horses, left her to whatever peace she could find. But as he worked, as he fed ash and muck stalls and mended a broken fence rail, his mind churned. What had he done? What trouble had he invited? John Broken Arrow would not let this stand. Men like him never did. Pride demanded revenge. Greed demanded more. And somewhere, somehow, this would come back. Would explode. Would cost something neither of them could afford. But even knowing that, even feeling the weight of consequences not yet arrived, Ethan did not regret his choice. Sarah had asked him to find purpose, to live, to mean something. Maybe he had finally started. Inside the house, Issei sat by the fire. Her hand touched her throat where the collar had been. The skin was still raw, still hurt. But it was free. For the first time in 6 years, it was free. She thought of John, of the rage in his eyes when Ethan threw down that money, of the promise of violence she knew would come. He would not stop, would not let her go, would hunt her until he found her or until one of them was dead. But tonight, just for tonight, she let herself pretend. Pretend the nightmare was over. Pretend she could breathe without fear. Pretend that, maybe impossibly, a man she barely knew had just saved her life. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft at first, then harder, covering tracks, erasing the past, building a wall of white between here and there, between now and what came next. For a little while, Iron Creek Ranch was an island, isolated, safe, separate from the world that wanted to hurt and the men who refused to let go. But winter in Arizona was patient, and somewhere in Prescott, John Broken Arrow drank whiskey bought with blood money and planned how to get back what he believed was his, planned how to reclaim not just a wife, but 160 acres of land that held more than dirt. Gold, revenge, pride. The storm was coming. This was just the quiet before. The first morning arrived with hesitation, as if the sun itself was unsure whether to rise on a world that had changed overnight. Issei woke in darkness. For a moment she did not remember where she was. Her hand went to her throat, searching for the collar. Finding nothing but raw skin and open air, panic flooded through her. Her breath came in shallow gasps. Her eyes flew open. The room was small, unfamiliar. But the door had a lock. She had used it. And through the single window, she could see snow falling in the gray light of dawn. Not John's house, not the nightmare, somewhere else. Somewhere that smelled of wood smoke and safety. Memory returned in pieces, the trading post, the slap, the man with gray eyes who had stepped between her and death. The ride through snow, this house, this room, this lock. She sat up slowly. Her body ached in the way it always did. 6 years of beatings left marks that went deeper than skin. Bones that had healed wrong, muscles that remembered how to flinch before they remembered how to move. But for the first time in longer than she could remember, she had slept through the night without waking to blows. She dressed in the borrowed dress, too large, but clean. She opened the door with the same caution a deer uses when entering a clearing, ready to bolt, ready to run. The main room was empty. The fire burned low in the stove. On the table sat a bowl of cold porridge, a cup of water, and a note written in neat, careful handwriting. 8 already. Gone to feed horses. Help yourself, you are safe here. 4 sentences, simple. But they shook something loose in her chest, something that felt dangerously close to hope. She ate the porridge. It was plain, flavorless, perfect. She had learned long ago that rich food made her sick, that her stomach had forgotten how to handle anything beyond the bare minimum needed for survival. When Ethan returned, snow dusting his shoulders and hat, she had already cleaned the bowl, already washed it, already set it back on the shelf, as if erasing evidence of her existence might make her less of a burden. He paused in the doorway, looked at the clean bowl, looked at her. Something passed across his face. Sadness, maybe, or recognition. The look of a man who understood what it meant to try to make yourself small enough to avoid notice. "You did not have to clean up," he said gently. "I wanted to," she replied. The words came out barely louder than breath. He nodded, did not push. Instead, he gestured toward the door. "Would you like to help with the morning work, or would you rather stay inside? Either is fine. There is no obligation." Obligation. That word. As if she had a choice. As if her presence here was not already a debt she could never repay. But she followed him outside anyway, because staying still felt like waiting for the blow that always came. And because maybe, just maybe, being useful would make him less likely to change his mind about letting her stay. The work was simple. Feed the chickens that were not there. Collect eggs that did not exist. Mend the fence where winter had cracked the wood. Ethan worked with steady hands and few words. He showed her what to do once, then stepped back. Let her try. Did not criticize when she fumbled, did not praise when she succeeded. Just let her be. It was the strangest kindness she had ever known. By midday her hands were cold and her back ached, and something in her chest had loosened, just slightly. Enough to breathe a little deeper, enough to look at the horizon without expecting violence to come galloping over it. They ate lunch in silence. Bread and dried meat, water from the well, nothing special. But Issei found herself eating slowly, savoring not the taste, but the absence of fear. The knowledge that no one would snatch the food away, that no one would make her earn the right to eat. In the afternoon, Ethan worked on repairing a saddle. Issei watched from across the room, her hands busy with mending a tear in the borrowed dress. Neither spoke. The silence was not comfortable, not yet, but it was not hostile either. It was simply there, a space between two people who did not yet know how to fill it. Then she fumbled with the needle. It slipped, pierced her thumb. Blood welled up bright and sudden. She gasped, not from pain, from memory, from the 1,000 times blood had meant something worse than a pinprick. Ethan looked up, saw the blood, stood and crossed to her in 3 strides. She flinched, pulled her hand back, waited for the anger, for the accusation of carelessness, for the punishment that always followed mistakes. Instead, he knelt, kept his distance, kept his voice low and calm. "May I see it?" She stared at him, at the question, at the asking permission, at the space he maintained between them. Slowly she extended her hand. He took it gently, so gently it felt like being touched by the memory of kindness rather than kindness itself. He examined the wound. It was nothing, a shallow prick. But he treated it as if it mattered, cleaned it with water, wrapped it with a strip of clean cloth, let go as soon as it was done. There, good as new. She looked at the bandage, at her hand, at the care that had been given without expectation of anything in return. "Thank you," she whispered. It was the first time she had spoken more than 3 words at once since arriving. And in Ethan's eyes she saw something shift, not pity, not triumph, just acknowledgement, just seeing. 2 more days passed in similar fashion, work and silence and small mercies. On the third day, December 18th, as snow fell thick enough to erase the world beyond the ranch, Ethan asked the question that had been sitting between them since the beginning. "What is your story, Essie? How did you come to wear that collar?" She went still. Her hands stopped moving. Her breath stopped moving. For a long moment she said nothing. Then slowly she set down the shirt she had been mending and looked at the fire instead of at him. "You do not want to know. I do." "Why?" "Because you are here, in my home, and I need to understand what I am protecting you from." She turned then, met his eyes, searched for the trap, for the angle, for the inevitable moment when his kindness would reveal its true cost. But she found none of that, found only patience and something else, something that looked almost like recognition, as if he too knew what it meant to carry wounds that did not show. So she told him, not all at once, not in order, but in fragments, in pieces pulled from memory like shards of glass from an old wound. She was 22 when she married John Broken Arrow, 1878. He was 29. A former scout for the cavalry, he had served in the Apache campaigns, had fought against her mother's people, had killed men who might have been her cousins, her uncles, her kin. But she did not know that then, did not know what war had done to him, what it had planted in his mind like seeds of poison that would take years to grow. He was kind at first, sober. He spoke of building a life, of starting fresh, of leaving the war behind. She believed him. She was alone. Her mother dead 3 years, her white father dead 10 years before that. She belonged nowhere, was wanted nowhere. Apache blood made her too Indian for the whites. White blood made her too pale for the Apache. She existed in the space between worlds belonging to neither. John offered belonging, offered a name, offered the illusion of safety. For 6 months, the illusion held. They lived in a small cabin outside Prescott. He worked odd jobs. She kept house. They were poor, but no poorer than most. They were surviving. That was enough. Then the dreams started. Nightmares. John would wake screaming, would thrash and fight invisible enemies, would call out names of men long dead. War had followed him home, had nested in his skull, and would not leave. He started drinking. A little at first, then more, then all the time. Whiskey that burned away the nightmares but replaced them with rage, with suspicion, with a violence that had nowhere to go except toward the person closest to him. The first time he hit her was in the spring of 1879, a slap, hard enough to knock her down, hard enough to split her lip. He apologized after, cried, swore it would never happen again. It happened again a week later, and then again, and then again, and then apologies stopped coming. By 1880, the beatings were regular, expected, part of the rhythm of their life together like sunrise and sunset. He would drink, would rage, would blame her for his failures, his pain, his inability to sleep, without seeing the faces of the men he had killed. In 1881, he put the collar on her, said it was to keep her from running, said she was his property, said the law would back him because wives were property, and Apache wives even more so. He was not wrong. The law did not care. The law had never cared about women like her. By 1882, she had stopped thinking of herself as human, had started thinking of herself as a thing, a possession, an object to be used or discarded depending on his mood. She no longer remembered what hope felt like, no longer remembered that life could be anything other than pain and waiting for pain. Then in 1883, John discovered something. Her mother had left her land, 160 acres near the reservation. Worthless, she had always thought, barren scrub and rock. But John learned differently, learned that beneath that worthless ground lay something valuable. Not much, but enough. Gold. Suddenly, the land mattered. Suddenly, Issei mattered, not as a person, but as an obstacle between him and wealth. He tried to force her to sign papers, papers that would transfer ownership to him. She refused. It was the only power she had left, the only way to resist, the only thing that was still hers. So he beat her harder, broke her ribs, twice, broke her arm, once, left scars across her back from the whip he used when his fists were not enough, tried to starve her into compliance, tried to break her will the way he had broken her body. But she held on, not out of strength, out of spite, out of the stubborn refusal to let him take the last thing she had, even if that thing was just dirt and rock and the ghosts of her mother's memory. In early 1884, she tried to run, made it 3 miles before he caught her, dragged her back by her hair, beat her so badly she could not stand for a week, threatened to kill her if she tried again. She believed him, but she also stopped caring whether she lived or died. In November of 1884 she ran again. This time she succeeded. This time he was too drunk to follow immediately. She walked through snow, through night, through hunger and cold and the absolute certainty that she would die out here, that freezing to death was better than going back. She survived by accident more than design, found a trapper's abandoned cabin, huddled there for 3 days eating nothing, drinking melted snow, waiting for death or rescue, whichever came first. Neither came, so she kept walking, kept moving, reached Prescott more dead than alive, tried to disappear into the crowds, tried to find work, tried to exist. But John found her anyway. Of course he did. Small town, nowhere to hide. And when he found her, he put the collar back on, paraded her through the streets like a dog he had reclaimed, made sure everyone knew she was his. That running was pointless, that he owned her in every way that mattered. Until yesterday. Until a man with gray eyes and a dead wife and nothing left to lose had decided for reasons Issei still could not understand that she mattered more than money or safety or common sense. By the time she finished speaking, night had fallen. The fire had burned low. Her voice had gone hoarse from disuse and emotion. And across from her, Ethan Coulter sat with tears running down his face. He did not hide them, did not wipe them away. Just let them fall. "I am sorry," he said finally. His voice was rough, broken. "I am so sorry that happened to you. It was not your fault. I know, but I am still sorry. Sorry that the world is the kind of place where men like him exist, where women like you suffer, where no one stops it." He stood, crossed to her, knelt so they were eye level, and then, slowly giving her time to refuse to pull away to reject the offer, he opened his arms. She hesitated. Touch had meant pain for so long. Touch had been the prelude to violence. Touch had been something to avoid, to endure, to survive. But his hands were open, his eyes were clear. And something in her, some part that had not yet died despite 6 years of trying, reached for him. She leaned forward, let him wrap his arms around her, let herself be held. And for the first time since her mother's funeral 10 years ago, she cried. Not silent tears, not the careful hidden weeping she had learned to do so, John would not hear, but great wrenching sobs that shook her entire body. Ethan held her through it, said nothing, just held on, just let her break apart, just gave her the space to grieve for everything she had lost and everything she had never been allowed to be. When the tears finally stopped, when she had nothing left, she pulled back, looked at him, saw that he was still crying too. "You are not broken," he said. "You are hurt. There is a difference." She wanted to believe him, wanted to think that hurt could heal, that damage could be undone, that she could be something other than the sum of her scars. But belief was hard. Hope was harder. So she simply nodded, and that for now was enough. A week passed, 7 days of snow and work and slow, careful steps towards something that might eventually become trust. Issei spoke more, not much, but enough. Ethan listened more, not pushing, but present, available. On December 22nd, Ethan announced they needed supplies from town. Issei's first instinct was to refuse, to hide, to make herself invisible. But he had been kind, had been patient, and she owed him at least the attempt at normalcy, so she climbed into the wagon beside him. Let him drive her back into Prescott, back into the world that had watched her suffer and done nothing. The town looked the same. Gray buildings, gray sky, gray people living gray lives. But now they stared, whispered, pointed. The woman who had been bought, the savage who had been saved, the scandal walking among them. Ethan ignored them all, pulled the wagon up to Peterson's general store, helped Issei down, walked inside with his hand hovering near her back, not touching, but ready to steady if needed. Mrs. Peterson stood behind the counter, a hard woman, thin and pinched, and carrying grudges like other people carried coin. She looked at Issei, looked at Ethan. Her mouth tightened. "I will not serve her?" Ethan's voice went cold, colder than the snow outside. "Then you will serve no one, because if you refuse, I will open a store next door, and I will sell everything cheaper. And I will bankrupt you before spring." Mrs. Peterson's eyes widened. She had money, but Ethan had land, had resources, and more than that had the kind of quiet determination that could not be argued with. She sold them supplies, flour, salt, coffee, but her hands shook with rage as she counted change, as she watched them leave. Outside, Reverend Shaw waited. His face was carved from righteous anger and old grief. His son had died in the Apache Wars. His son would never come home. And here was a woman with Apache blood walking free while his boy rotted in the ground. "Coulter," his voice carried across the street, "you shame yourself, harboring that creature. My son died because of her kind." Ethan stopped, turned. His hand moved to the gun at his hip, not drawing, just resting there. A reminder, a warning. "Your son died in a war. Ise killed no one. She is not her people, any more than you are yours. Judge her by her actions, not her blood, or do not judge at all." The Bible says to separate the wheat from the chaff, to cast out the wicked. The Bible also says to love thy neighbor, to show mercy, to protect the widow and the orphan. Which part are you following, Reverend? Shaw had no answer, just hatred, just the endless grinding need to blame someone for a loss that could not be undone. He turned, walked away, left his anger hanging in the air like smoke. They loaded the supplies, prepared to leave. Then Issei saw it, nailed to the post outside the saloon, a piece of paper written in careful anonymous script. Return the Indian woman or face consequences. No signature, no name. But the threat was clear. Prescott had spoken, and Prescott demanded compliance. Ethan tore the note down, crumpled it, dropped it in the snow. But Issei had already memorized every word. On the ride home she spoke without looking at him. "I should leave. No. I am bringing you trouble. I am not worth it." He pulled the wagon to a stop, turned to face her fully. His eyes were steel. "You do not get to decide your worth, and you do not get to leave. I made you a promise, that you were safe, and I keep my promises, all of them." "Why?" The word broke out of her. "Why do you care you do not know me? I am nothing to you." "You are not nothing." His voice gentled. "You are a person who deserves safety, who deserves kindness, who deserves to live without fear. That is enough. That has always been enough." She wanted to argue, wanted to insist that kindness was a lie and safety was temporary and nothing good ever lasted, but his eyes held hers. And she saw in them the same grief she carried. Different source, same weight. He understood. Maybe not everything, but enough. "Okay," she whispered, "I will stay." He nodded, took the reins, drove them home through snow that was falling harder now, covering tracks, hiding roads, isolating them from the world that wanted to hurt. But that night, as Issei lay in her locked room and Ethan settled into the barn loft, neither of them slept easy. Because threats in small towns were never empty. Because grudges were currency. And because somewhere out there, John Broken Arrow sat in a saloon, drinking away the money he had gotten for his wife and planning how to get her back. Not for love, not for her, but for 160 acres of land that held enough gold to kill for. The storm was building. This was just the first whisper of wind before the howl began. Christmas Eve arrived soft and unexpected like grace touching a world that had forgotten what grace looked like. Snow fell in thick, lazy spirals, the kind of snow that muffled sound and made everything feel distant, separate, safe. Inside Iron Creek Ranch firelight danced across rough wooden walls. The scent of pine filled the air. Ethan had cut a small tree that morning, dragged it inside, propped it in the corner. Nothing fancy, no ornaments. But it stood there like a promise, like hope, refusing to die. Issei stood near the window watching snow accumulate on the sill. She had been with him for 9 days now. 9 days of learning that not all men were weapons, that safety could be more than a moment stolen between beatings, that silence could be comfort instead of waiting for violence. She wore the borrowed dress, had mended it carefully, made it fit better. Ethan had offered to buy her new clothes in town, but she refused. This dress was enough, more than enough. It was clean. It was whole. It did not carry memories of blood. "I made something for you," Ethan said from behind her. She turned. He stood holding a small bundle wrapped in cloth. His hands, calloused and scarred from years of ranch work, held it with surprising gentleness. "You did not have to do that." "I know, but I wanted to." She took the bundle, unwrapped it slowly. Inside lay 2 things. A scarf, hand-knitted, simple gray wool, and beneath it something that made her breath catch. A gun, small, a Colt pocket revolver, well-maintained, clean, loaded. She looked up at him, confusion and something darker crossing her face. Fear, maybe, or memory. Guns meant pain in her world. Guns meant John drunk and waving death around like a toy. Ethan seemed to read her thoughts. He stepped closer. Not too close. Never too close without permission. Not for him to use on you, for you to use, if needed, if anyone tries to hurt you again. He paused, held her gaze. I want you to be able to protect yourself, even from me, if it comes to that. I would never, I know, but the choice should be yours, always yours. She looked down at the gun, at the weight of it in her hands, at the power it represented. For 6 years she had been powerless, had been a thing for John to break. But this was different. This was possibility. This was refusal. Will you teach me? Her voice was barely audible. How to use it. Starting tomorrow, I promise. She set the gun down carefully, picked up the scarf, wrapped it around her shoulders. It was warm, soft, made with care that no one had shown her in years. From her own pocket, she pulled something small, a handkerchief. She had found scraps of cloth in Sarah's old sewing basket, had spent 3 nights stitching by firelight, had embroidered the corner with a simple pattern, a patchy design, the symbol for protection, for home. She held it out to him. Her hands trembled slightly. I made this for you. It is not much. Ethan took it, studied the stitching, traced the pattern with his thumb. When he looked up, his eyes were bright, not quite tears, but close. It is everything. Thank you. They stood there in the warmth, in the silence, in the strange and fragile peace that had grown between them. Outside, snow continued its quiet work of erasing the world. Inside, something equally quiet was being built, something that had no name yet. But that felt for the first time in a long time like it might survive. That evening they ate a simple meal, venison stew, bread, coffee that was more bitter than good but hot enough to matter. Afterward they sat by the fire, not speaking, not needing to, just existing in the same space without fear. Issei's hand rested on the armrest of her chair. Ethan's rested on his. The distance between them was perhaps 6 inches, an ocean, a hair's breadth, both and neither. Slowly, carefully giving her every chance to refuse, Ethan moved his hand those 6 inches, let his fingers rest near hers, not touching, not demanding, just offering. She looked at his hand, at the scars, at the steadiness, at the choice he was giving her, then with a hesitation that came from 6 years of pain and 9 days of learning that maybe possibly not all touch had to hurt. She moved her hand to meet his. Their fingers intertwined, his rough from work, hers rough from survival. And in that simple gesture something shifted. Some wall that had stood between them developed a crack, let light through. They sat like that for an hour, maybe more. Time moved differently in the firelight. When they finally let go, when Issei stood to retreat to her room and Ethan prepared to head to the barn, they both felt it. The change, the possibility, the dangerous, terrifying, beautiful idea that maybe this could be more than survival. Maybe it could be healing. But healing, like storms, never arrives alone. Christmas morning came cold and bright, sun on snow, the kind of light that hurt to look at. Ethan woke early in the barn loft, dressed quickly, his breath fogged in the frozen air. He needed to start the fire, needed to get the house warm before Issei woke. But as he climbed down from the loft, as his boots hit the packed earth floor, he heard it. Hoofbeats, coming up the road, slow, deliberate. The sound of someone who was not trying to hide their approach. Ethan's hand went to his gun. He moved to the barn door, peered out through the crack. A single rider, tall, wrapped in a heavy coat, approaching through the snow like a ghost given form. The man stopped 50 yards from the house, raised his hands, showing he was unarmed, or at least not holding a weapon. In this country, that distinction mattered. Ethan Coulter, the voice carried across the distance. I mean no harm. I need to talk to you about Issei. Every muscle in Ethan's body went tight. He stepped out of the barn, gun drawn, hammer back. State your business, fast. The rider dismounted, moved slowly, kept his hands visible. As he came closer, Ethan could see his face more clearly. Patchy features, strong jaw, eyes that held something complicated, guilt, maybe, or regret. My name is Thomas Broken Arrow. I am John's brother. The world stopped. Time froze. Ethan's finger tightened on the trigger. Thomas saw it, stopped moving, spoke quickly. I am not here to take her back. I swear it. I am here to warn you, both of you. Behind Ethan, the house door opened. Issei stepped out, still in her nightdress, barefoot in the snow, hair loose around her shoulders. When she saw Thomas, all color drained from her face. "No." The word came out broken. "No, no, no." Thomas looked at her. Something in his expression shattered. I am so sorry. For everything. For not stopping him. For not protecting you. For being a coward." "What do you want?" Ethan's voice was ice. "Why are you here?" Thomas took a breath, released it slowly. When he spoke again, every word fell like a stone into still water. "John is coming for her, and he is not coming alone." The words hung in the frozen air. Issei swayed. Ethan caught her with his free hand, steadied her. His gun never wavered from Thomas. "Explain, now." Thomas nodded, began to speak, and with every sentence the fragile piece of Christmas morning crumbled like sandcastles before a tide. John had not accepted losing Issei, had not accepted the humiliation of being paid off like a common thief, had not accepted that the land he believed was rightfully his might slip away. So he had gone looking for help, for men with guns and no conscience, for ways to take back what he thought he owned. He found Judge Samuel Blackwood, a territorial judge, corrupt to the bone, a man who could be bought with whiskey and promises. John offered him both, offered him a share of the gold that lay beneath Issei's inherited land, offered him vengeance against Ethan Coulter, who had dared to interfere with what Blackwood considered proper order. White men on top, everyone else beneath. Blackwood agreed, drew up papers, legal papers, papers that declared Issei had fled her lawful husband, papers that gave John the right to reclaim her by force, if necessary, papers that made Ethan a criminal for harboring a runaway wife. But papers alone were not enough. John wanted certainty, wanted overwhelming force, so he hired 4 men, gunslingers, the kind who would kill for $20 and not lose sleep after. Men who had learned their trade in range wars and blood feuds, men for whom violence was just another form of work. Thomas had heard about it 3 days ago, had tried to talk John out of it, had begged him to let Issei go, to accept that she was gone, to move on. John had laughed in his face, had shown him the papers, had shown him the gold samples from the land, had shown him the future he planned, riches, power, revenge, all of it bought with his wife's suffering. That was when Thomas decided that blood did not excuse cruelty, that being brothers did not mean being complicit, that there were lines even family should not cross. He had ridden through the night, through the storm, through cold that could kill a man if he stopped moving, ridden here to warn them, to give them what John would never give, a chance. When? Ethan's voice was flat, controlled, the voice of a man who had been a soldier once and remembered how to be one again. 6 days, December 31st. They will come at night, around 10, when most people are celebrating the new year, when no one will notice gunfire. How many? 6 total. John, 4 hired guns. And Blackwood, though he will stay back. He wants to watch, wants to be able to say he was just enforcing the law. What about the Sheriff Morrison? Thomas shook his head. He knows, but he will not help. Blackwood outranks him, and he is not brave enough to stand against a judge, even a corrupt one. Issei spoke then. Her voice was hollow, already dead. Then it is over, 6 against 1, and the law on their side. She looked at Ethan. Tears ran down her face. I should go back. It is the only way to keep you safe. No. Ethan's voice was iron. You are not going back, not ever. You will die. Maybe, but I will die fighting for something that matters. That is more than I have had in 5 years. He finally lowered the gun, looked at Thomas, really looked at him, saw the guilt, saw the shame, saw the desperate need to make something right that had been wrong for so long. Will you help us fight with us? Thomas did not hesitate. Yes, it is why I came. Even against your own brother. He stopped being my brother when he put that collar on her, when he beat her, when he chose gold over her life. Thomas looked at Issei. I should have stopped him years ago. I cannot undo that, but I can do this. I can stand with you now. The 3 of them stood in the snow. Christmas morning, the day of miracles and hope and peace on earth. Standing in a world that offered none of those things, only choice, only the decision of whether to fight or flee, to stand or surrender, to believe that some things were worth bleeding for, or to accept that nothing was. Ethan looked at Issei, at this woman he barely knew, this stranger he had bought with all his money, this person who had somehow become the reason he woke up in the morning, the reason he remembered that life could be more than just surviving. We fight, he said, all of us, together. Issei wanted to argue, wanted to insist that her life was not worth his death. But she saw something in his eyes that stopped her. The same thing she had seen when he removed her collar, when he held her as she cried, when he taught her that touch could be gentle. Purpose. He had found purpose. And taking that away from him would be crueler than any beating John had ever given her. "Okay," she whispered. "We fight." Thomas nodded. "Then we have 6 days. We need to prepare. I know their plan. I know how they will attack. We can use that." They moved inside, built up the fire, spread out what they knew like pieces of a puzzle. Thomas drew maps in the dirt floor, showed them where the men would position, how they would approach, what weapons they carried, how they thought. John would come from the front, proud, stupid, wanting to be seen, wanting Issei to know he was there. The 4 hired guns would split, 2 from the back, 2 from the sides. They would try to surround the house, pin them in, force surrender or burn them out. Blackwood would stay far back, safe, ready to declare it all legal once the violence was done. But knowing the plan meant they could counter it, could prepare, could turn the trap around on those who thought they were the hunters. For the next 5 days they worked. Ethan taught Issei to shoot. Started with basic stance, how to hold the gun, how to breathe, how to aim. She was clumsy at first, scared of the kick, scared of the noise, scared of what it meant to hold death in her hands, but she learned. Slowly. Then, faster. By the 3rd day she could hit a target at 20 paces, not every time, but enough. By the 5th day she could reload without looking, could fire 5 shots in steady succession, could look at the gun and see not a tool of her oppression, but a tool of her survival. Thomas rode into town, carefully, quietly, spoke to people he trusted. Doc Miller agreed to testify about Issei's injuries if it came to legal fight after. Pastor Weller, the kind one who had brought food during the storm, agreed to provide sanctuary if they needed to hide. Even Mrs. Peterson, after hearing the full story from Thomas, softened, promised that if Issei survived, she would not be turned away again. Sheriff Morrison met with them once, listened, looked pained, but shook his head. "I cannot fight a judge, even a crooked one. If I do, I lose my badge, maybe my life. I am sorry, but this is your fight." He was a coward, but an honest coward. That was something, at least. They fortified the ranch as best they could, moved furniture to create cover, placed extra ammunition in strategic spots, cleared sight lines. Thomas showed them how soldiers thought, how to create kill zones, how to turn a house into a fortress. Ethan watched Issei during these preparations, watched her transform. She no longer flinched when he moved quickly, no longer assumed every raised hand was a threat. She stood straighter, spoke more, met his eyes without fear. War was coming. But war, strangely, was waking her up, was showing her that she had power, that she could fight back, that she did not have to be a victim forever. On the evening of December 30th, with 1 day left before the storm hit, they sat together by the fire, all 3 of them. Ethan, Issei, and Thomas. An unlikely alliance. A broken soldier, a battered woman, and a man trying to atone for years of cowardice. "Tomorrow we might die," Ethan said quietly. "All of us." "Yes," Thomas agreed. Issei said nothing, just stared at the flames. "I want you both to know," Ethan continued, "that these past weeks have meant something, have mattered. I was dead before Issei arrived, walking, breathing, but dead. She gave me a reason to live again, and Thomas, you gave us a chance. Whatever happens tomorrow, thank you." Thomas nodded, stood. "I will take first watch. You 2 should rest." He stepped outside, leaving them alone. The silence stretched, comfortable now, familiar. Issei shifted closer to Ethan, not much, just enough that their shoulders touched. "If we survive," she said softly, "what happens after?" "I do not know, but I would like to find out. With you." She turned to look at him, really look at him, at this man who had saved her for no reason except that it was right, who had taught her that she was worth saving, who had given her back pieces of herself she thought were lost forever. "Ethan," she whispered, "yes, I think I am falling in love with you." The words hung between them, fragile, terrifying, true. He reached up, touched her face gently, gave her time to pull away. She did not. Instead, she leaned into his hand, into the warmth, into the possibility. "I know I am falling in love with you," he replied. They kissed, not desperately, not with the passion of people who think they are about to die, but slowly, carefully. 2 broken people learning what it meant to be whole again, learning that love could be gentle, that touch could heal, that tomorrow might bring death, but tonight brought this moment, this choice, this affirmation that even in a violent world, beauty could exist. When they pulled apart, both were crying, but neither was sad. "We will survive," Issei said. "We have to." "We will," Ethan agreed. Together. Outside, snow began to fall again. Thomas stood watch, gun ready, eyes scanning the darkness. 6 men were coming, 6 men who thought they were hunters, 6 men who did not know that sometimes the prey learned to bite back. December 31st dawned cold and clear, the last day of 1884, the last day of peace. By tonight, blood would stain the snow. By tonight, everything would change. But for now, in the gray light of morning, 3 people stood together, ready, afraid, but no longer alone. The storm was here, and they would meet it, standing. 9 o'clock came and went like a whispered prayer. The house was ready as it could be. Furniture had been moved, windows reinforced with shutters, extra ammunition placed in corners where hands could find it in darkness, lamps positioned to cast light outward but leave the interior in shadow. Everything calculated, everything planned. But plans only survived until the first shot was fired. After that, there was only instinct and luck and the thin line between living and dying. Ethan stood at the main window, Winchester rifle in his hands. He had cleaned it 3 times today, knew every inch of it, knew how it pulled slightly left at distance, knew the weight, knew the feel. It was an old friend, one he had hoped never to need again. But here they were, New Year's Eve, 1884 becoming 1885 at midnight. And before that transition could happen, blood would be spilled. The only question was whose. Issei crouched in the barn loft. Thomas had positioned her there 2 hours ago, given her clear sight lines to the front approach and the eastern flank. She held the small Colt revolver Ethan had given her for Christmas, 6 shots. She would need to make each one count. Her hands trembled slightly, not from cold, from the weight of what was coming, from the knowledge that tonight she might kill, might become the thing John had always accused her of being, a savage, a killer, a creature of violence. But she steadied herself with a truth that had grown solid over the past weeks. Violence in defense of life was not the same as violence for cruelty's sake. John had taught her the latter. Ethan had given her permission for the former. And tonight she would use it. Thomas' broken arrow stood in the trees behind the house, hidden, waiting. His rifle was a Sharps, long range, accurate. He had chosen his position carefully, could see the back approach, could cover their weakest angle, could shoot men he had never met to save a woman he had failed to protect when it mattered most. Redemption, he had learned, often came at the end of a gun. The 3 of them waited in silence, connected by purpose if not proximity, each alone with their thoughts, each carrying the weight of what tonight meant. For Ethan, it was proof that 5 years of emptiness could end, that Sarah's dying wish for him to find purpose had not been in vain. For Issei, it was the final severing, the last thread binding her to John. Win or lose, live or die, she would never be his again. For Thomas, it was atonement, the chance to choose right over blood, justice over family. 9:30 passed, then 9:45. Time moved like honey, thick, slow, agonizing. Every minute stretched into an hour. Every sound became a threat. Wind in the trees, snow sliding from the roof, the creak of wood settling in the cold, all of it potential danger, all of it false alarm, until it was not. At 9:52, Ethan saw them, dark shapes moving against darker night, coming up the road slowly. No attempt at stealth. John wanted to be seen, wanted Issei to know he was coming, wanted her to feel the dread build, wanted her to remember that he always won, always took back what was his. He counted them. 5 riders, not 6. That meant someone was already in position, already flanking, already moving to cut off escape. His heart rate slowed, his breathing steadied. The soldier in him, dormant for years, woke up, assessed, calculated, prepared. In the barn, Issei saw them too, pressed herself lower against the rough boards, checked her gun for the 4th time. 6 bullets, all loaded, all ready. Her finger rested along the trigger guard, not on the trigger, not yet. Ethan had taught her that. Do not put your finger on the trigger until you intend to fire, until there is no other choice. In the trees, Thomas tracked movement to his left. 1 man. Trying to circle wide, trying to get behind the barn, amateur work. The man made too much noise, broke too many branches. Might as well have been ringing a bell. Thomas sighted down the barrel, waited. Patience was the first lesson of hunting, and this was hunting, just with higher stakes than deer. At exactly 10 o'clock, the 5 riders stopped, 50 yards from the house, close enough to talk, far enough to scatter if shooting started. They sat on their horses, silent, making Ethan wait, making him sweat. Psychological warfare before the physical kind began. Then, John Broken Arrow dismounted, walked forward 10 paces, stood in the open like a man who believed himself untouchable. "See," his voice carried through the night, slurred slightly. "Drunk, of course." "I know you are in there. Come out. This does not have to be difficult." Silence from the house. John swayed, steadied himself, tried again. "The law is on my side. Judge Blackwood is here. He has papers. You are my wife, my property, and you will come home." Still nothing. But Ethan could see movement now. The other riders spreading out. 2 moving left, 2 moving right. The noose tightening. He had maybe 30 seconds before they were in position. "Coulter," John shouted, "you have something that belongs to me. Return her, and I will let you live. Keep her, and you die. Your choice." Ethan stepped into the doorway. Not fully outside, just visible enough. His rifle held casual, but ready. Always ready. "She belongs to herself, not to you, not to anyone. You want her, you will have to kill me first." John laughed. The sound was ugly. Broken glass and rotting wood. That can be arranged. Behind John, a carriage sat in shadow. Ethan could barely make it out, but he knew who was in it. Judge Samuel Blackwood, watching, waiting to declare everything legal once the violence was done. A coward's courage, safety bought with other men's blood. "This is your last chance. Coulter, send her out now." No. One word. Simple. Final. The moment crystallized around it. Before there had been possibility, negotiation, paths that did not end in death. But that word closed all those doors, left only one way forward. Violence. John's hand moved to his gun. Not fast. He was drunk. Slow. Predictable. But the men with him were not drunk. Were not slow. Were professionals who had done this before and would do it again if they survived tonight. The one on the far left drew first. His pistol cleared leather smooth. Aimed at Ethan, finger tightening on the trigger. Thomas fired. The sharps boomed like thunder. The man jerked, looked surprised, fell from his horse, dead before he hit the ground. Headshot, clean, merciful in its efficiency. Chaos erupted. The remaining 3 riders scattered, horses screaming, men shouting, guns firing wild, muzzle flashes lit the night like lightning. Bullets thunked into wood, shattered windows, tore through the walls of the house and the dreams it contained. Ethan dropped to one knee, fired, missed. The riders were moving too fast. Fired again, this time connected. A man yelped, clutched his leg, did not fall but slowed, hurt, bleeding, one less threat at full capacity. From the barn loft, EC tracked the chaos. 2 riders had broken toward her position, trying to get behind the house, trying to flank. She waited. "Let them come closer." Ethan's voice echoed in her memory. "Do not shoot until you are sure. Do not waste bullets. Every shot has to count." The first rider passed beneath her position, 20 feet away. Impossible to miss. She aimed, breathed out, squeezed the trigger. The gun kicked, louder than she expected. The man grunted, grabbed his shoulder, but did not fall. She had hit him, but not well enough, not clean enough. He looked up, saw her in the loft, raised his own gun. Terror froze her. For one heartbeat, 2. She was back in John's house, back under his fists. Back being the victim who could only endure. Then something broke. Something Sarah White Dove had been before she became Issei. Before she learned to make herself small. A warrior's daughter. A survivor's rage. She fired again. And again. 3 more shots in rapid succession. The second missed. The third caught him in the chest. The fourth in the throat. He fell, hit the ground, and did not move, did not breathe, did not exist anymore except as a body cooling in the snow. Issei stared at what she had done. At the man she had killed. At the blood spreading dark against white. She wanted to feel horror, guilt, remorse. But all she felt was cold satisfaction. He had meant to hurt her, to take her back to hell, and she had stopped him. Permanently. 1 bullet left. She reloaded with shaking hands. Dropped 2 bullets in the snow before getting the cylinder full again. Ethan had made her practice this, had made her do it, until her fingers remembered even when her mind could not. Outside the house, Ethan traded shots with the man he had wounded. The gunslinger had found cover behind a water trough, was firing methodically, professionally, keeping Ethan pinned, making it impossible to maneuver. Then John rushed the house, stupid, drunk, grief or rage or greed driving him forward when sense said, "Stay back." He fired as he ran. Wild shots. None came close, but the attempt forced Ethan to shift focus, to track this new threat. Ethan fired, caught John in the leg. The man went down hard, screaming, cursing, clawing at the snow. His gun skittered away, out of reach. Ethan moved to finish it. Stepped out of the doorway, raised his rifle, aimed at the man who had brutalized Issei for 6 years, the man who had put a collar on her, who had broken her bones and tried to break her spirit. One shot, that was all it would take. One shot, and this would be over. But he hesitated. Not from mercy, from the need to see Issei do it, to let her have this, to let her reclaim her power in the most final way possible. That hesitation cost him. The gunslinger behind the trough had been waiting, had read Ethan's intention, had used John as bait. Now he took his shot. Careful, aimed, professional. The bullet caught Ethan in the left shoulder, spun him, dropped him. Pain exploded white and hot. His rifle fell from numb fingers. Blood poured hot down his arm, soaked his shirt, steamed in the frozen air. From the barn, Issei saw him fall, saw the blood, saw him try to rise and fail. Something inside her shattered. All the control she had built, all the careful walls she had constructed, all of it gone in an instant. "Ethan!" The scream tore from her throat, raw, primal. The sound of a woman watching the only good thing in her life bleed out in the snow. She fired her remaining bullets at the gunslinger, missed every shot. Her hands shook too badly, her vision blurred with tears. But she had to do something, had to help, had to stop this. Thomas emerged from the trees, shot the gunslinger in the back. No honor in it, no fairness, just necessity. The man died surprised, probably thought he had won, probably thought Ethan's death would end this. But there were still 2 men unaccounted for, the one Issei had wounded, and one more. The one who had been circling, who had gone quiet, who was somewhere in the darkness doing something as they could not see. Movement near the carriage. Judge Blackwood stepped out, fat, soft, wearing fine clothes that had no place in blood and snow. He held a pistol, pointed it at Thomas. "Drop your weapon, Mr. Broken Arrow. You are interfering with a legal proceeding. Drop it now, or I will have you arrested or shot. Either is legal in my jurisdiction." Thomas did not drop his rifle. Instead, he turned it on Blackwood. The 2 men stood 40 yards apart, guns raised, standoff. "This is not legal. This is murder dressed as law, and I will not let it stand. You will hang for this, for killing these men, for defying a judge's orders. Maybe, but you will die first." Blackwood's courage failed. His gun wavered. He was not a brave man, not a fighter, just a bureaucrat with delusions of power. And when faced with someone willing to kill him, all that power evaporated. He lowered his weapon, stepped back into the carriage, shouted to his driver, "Go, go now!" The carriage lurched forward, horses straining, wheels cutting through snow, fleeing, leaving John and the survivors to whatever fate had planned. Thomas turned back to the fight, scanned for threats, saw the wounded gunslinger trying to crawl away, shot him, not in anger, just finishing what had been started. No room for mercy tonight, no room for loose ends. That left only one. The man in the darkness, the one they had lost track of, the one who could end this in an instant if he was smart, if he was patient. Ethan lay in the snow, bleeding, trying to breathe through pain that felt like fire eating him from the inside. His left arm was useless, dead weight. But his right hand found his pistol, drew it, held it ready even though holding anything felt impossible. "Issei," he called. His voice was weak, thready. "Stay down, stay hidden." But she was already moving, already climbing down from the barn, already running toward him through snow and blood and the bodies of men who had tried to take her freedom. She dropped to her knees beside him, pressed her hands against his shoulder, trying to stop the bleeding, trying to hold him together through will alone. "You are not dying. You hear me? You are not dying. I am okay, just a shoulder. I have had worse." "Liar!" He smiled despite the pain. "Maybe." A sound behind them. Boot on snow. They both turned. The last gunslinger stood there, gun raised, aimed at Issei's back. He had circled all the way around, had waited for this moment, for them to be distracted, vulnerable, together. "End of the line," he said. His voice was flat. "Professional. No anger, no hate, just a job, just work. Ethan tried to raise his pistol. Too slow, too weak, blood loss making everything distant and slow. Thomas was too far, could not get an angle, could not help. The gunslinger's finger tightened on the trigger, then movement. Fast, desperate, from the bar loft. E.C. had climbed back up during the chaos, had reloaded her Colt, had one angle the gunslinger had not accounted for. She fired. 3 shots, rapid. 1 missed. 1 caught his shoulder. The 3rd took him in the throat. He dropped, gurgling, dead before he hit the ground. Thomas finished the wounded gunslinger who was still crawling. 1 shot, clean. No mercy left for men who sold violence. Silence fell. 4 hired guns dead. Judge Blackwood fled. The battle was over. Except for one man. John Broken Arrow still lay in the snow where Ethan had shot him, bleeding from his leg wound, but alive, conscious, and furious. He saw his hired guns dead, saw his plan shattered, saw Issei standing over the man she had killed, gun still smoking in her hand. And he laughed, blood-tinged, broken, the laugh of a man who had nothing left to lose. "You think this is over?" He pushed himself up on his elbows. "You think you won? She is still my wife, still my property." "The law says so." He started crawling, not away, toward her, toward Issei, even wounded, even defeated. He refused to accept it, refused to let her go. "I will find you. I will take you back. I will make you regret every moment of this betrayal." Issei stood frozen, watching him come. This man who had brutalized her for 6 years, who had put a collar on her, who had broken her bones and tried to break her spirit, he was wounded, pathetic, crawling through his Oran Sahon blood. But he was still coming, still threatening, still believing he owned her. Something inside her snapped. Not fear, not anymore. Rage, pure, burning. 6 years of suppressed fury finally finding its voice. She walked toward him, gun raised, steady. Her hands did not shake. Her voice did not waver. John saw her coming, saw the gun. For the first time in 6 years, saw fear in his own eyes instead of hers. "Issei, wait. I am your husband. You cannot. I am not your wife, not your property, not your anything." She stopped 5 feet away, close enough to see his face clearly, to see the moment he understood that this was real, that she was not the broken woman he had trained to flinch, that something fundamental had changed. 6 years, she said. Her voice was ice. 6 years you beat me. 6 years you told me I was worthless. 6 years you made me believe I deserved the pain. John tried to speak. She talked over him. "But I was wrong. I never deserved it. And you never owned me. You just convinced me I had no choice, that there was no escape, that this was all I would ever be." She raised the gun higher, aimed at his chest. "Tonight I choose. I choose freedom. I choose life. I choose to never fear you again. Issei, please. My name is Sarah White Dove, and I am not afraid anymore." She fired. The first bullet caught him in the stomach. He gasped, clutched at the wound. Blood poured through his fingers. That was for the collar. She fired again. The second bullet struck his chest, center mass, fatal. His eyes went wide. Blood bubbled on his lips. That was for every woman who could not fight back. John Broken Arrow fell back into the snow, tried to breathe, could not. The light faded from his eyes, and 6 years of terror ended in a moment of absolute justice. He was dead, truly dead, and Issei had killed him. She stood over his body, gun still raised, making sure, making certain he would never rise again, never hurt her again, never own anyone again. Then the gun dropped from her hand. Her legs gave out. She fell to her knees in the blood-stained snow and screamed. Not fear, not pain. Release. Catharsis. The sound of every beating she had endured. Every night she had cried herself to sleep. Every moment she had thought she would not survive. All of it pouring out in one primal, earth-shaking cry. Silence fell. Total. Absolute. The kind of silence that comes after violence, when the world has to remember how to breathe, how to exist without gunfire and screaming and death. 4 men dead. John among them. Judge Blackwood fled. The battle was over. But Ethan was still bleeding, still dying if they did not stop it. Issei tore fabric from her dress, packed it against his wound, pressed hard. He gasped, went white, but the bleeding slowed. Thomas ran over, dropped to his knees, examined the wound with practiced eyes. Through and through, missed the bone, missed the artery. He will live if we stop the bleeding and keep infection out. Help me get him inside. Together they lifted Ethan, carried him into the house, laid him on the table. Issei lit every lamp, made the room bright as day. Thomas heated water, found clean cloth. They worked together, cleaning, binding, stitching. Ethan drifted in and out, pain dragging him under, willpower dragging him back. Outside, snow began to fall again, covering the bodies, covering the blood, covering the evidence of what had happened here tonight. By morning it would look almost peaceful, almost clean, almost as if this had never happened. But it had happened, and nothing would ever be the same. The house smelled of blood and gunpowder, and the sharp tang of fear slowly releasing its grip. Ethan lay on the kitchen table, shirt cut away, shoulder wrapped in bandages already seeping red. His breathing came shallow and fast. Pain medication was a luxury they did not have. Only whiskey, only willpower, only the knowledge that he had survived worse and would survive this too. Issei stood over him, hands shaking, covered in his blood and the blood of the man she had killed in the barn. Her dress was ruined, torn, stained. But she did not care about the dress, did not care about anything except the man in front of her who had stepped between her and death and taken a bullet for his courage. Thomas worked beside her, checking the wound, pressing cloth against it. His hands were steady, practiced. He had seen combat, had tended wounded men before, knew the difference between injuries that killed and injuries that just hurt like killing. "He will live," Thomas said quietly. The bullet went through clean, no bone fragments, no major vessels hit. He lost blood, but not too much. He will be weak for weeks, but he will live. Issei released a breath she had not known she was holding. Her knees went weak. She caught herself on the table edge, steadied, refused to fall. Not now, not when there was still work to do. Outside, the night had gone quiet again. 5 bodies lay cooling in the snow, John Broken Arrow among them. The man who had brutalized Issei for 6 years now, just another corpse, just another problem solved. Thomas moved to the window, looked out at the carnage. Judge Blackwood's carriage tracks leading away into darkness, evidence of a battle won, but at terrible cost. "We need to deal with the bodies," he said, "before anyone else arrives, before questions are asked that we cannot answer." But first they needed to tend the living. Ethan reached for her with his good arm. She took his hand, held it, felt his warmth, his strength, his steady, unwavering presence. "It is over," she whispered. "It is over," he agreed. "You are free." For the first time in 6 years, she believed it. The next morning arrived gray and cold. Thomas had spent the night loading bodies into a wagon, would take them to town, would face whatever questions came, would tell the truth and let it stand or fall on its own merit. But before he left, riders appeared on the horizon, a dozen men, led by Sheriff Morrison. Behind him, faces Issei recognized from town, Doc Miller, Pastor Weller, even Mrs. Peterson. Not a mob, not a posse, something else. Witnesses, people who wanted to see, to understand, to bear witness to what had happened here. Sheriff Morrison dismounted, took in the scene, the blood, the bullet holes, the evidence of violence. His face remained neutral, professional, but his eyes held something complicated, respect maybe, or acknowledgement. The recognition that sometimes the law failed and people had to save themselves. "Mr. Coulter, Miss White Dove, Mr. Broken Arrow." He nodded to each of them. "Word reached town last night about Judge Blackwood, about what happened here. I need to understand what occurred." Thomas stepped forward, spoke clearly, laid out the facts, John's abuse, the hired guns, Blackwood's corruption, the papers that gave legal cover to kidnapping and murder, the standoff, the battle, the deaths. He pulled out evidence. John's journals that documented years of beatings, papers showing Blackwood had been paid, testimony he had gathered from townspeople who had seen Issei's injuries, Doc Miller's medical report detailing every broken bone, every scar, every mark of suffering. Sheriff Morrison listened, examined the evidence, looked at Issei, at the raw skin where the collar had been, at the bandages on Ethan's shoulder, at the bodies in the snow. Finally he spoke. This was self-defense. Clear as day. John Broken Arrow brought armed men to kill or kidnap. You defended yourselves. The law supports that right, even for Apache women, even against corrupt judges. He turned to his men. Load the bodies. We will bury them in town, and we will send word to the territorial capital about Judge Blackwood, about what he tried to do here. He will answer for his crimes. I guarantee it. Then he did something unexpected. He removed his hat, held it to his chest, looked at Issei directly. Ma'am, I apologize for not helping sooner, for being too afraid to stand against Blackwood. You should not have had to fight alone. That is my failure, and I am sorry." Issei stared at him, at this man who had chosen cowardice before, but chose honesty now. It was not enough, would never be enough, but it was something. "Thank you, Sheriff." He nodded, replaced his hat, turned to his men. "Let's move." As they worked, other townspeople approached. Mrs. Peterson came first. Her face was softer than Issei had ever seen it. She carried a basket, food, bread and preserves and dried meat. "For you, for your recovery. I was wrong. About you, about everything. My husband used to hit me 20 years ago before he died. I survived, but I never fought back, never had the courage. You did. You are braver than I ever was." She set the basket down. Then, shocking everyone, including herself, she hugged Issei, brief, awkward, but real. When she pulled back, there were tears in her eyes. "Welcome to Prescott, dear, truly welcome." Doc Miller examined Ethan's wound, redressed it, gave instructions for care, offered to visit in a week to check healing, refused payment, just tipped his hat and left. Pastor Weller lingered longest, spoke quietly with Ethan and Issei. Both made an offer that surprised them. "When you are ready, when Mr. Coulter has healed, I would be honored to marry you both, in my church, before God and the community, if you wish it." Ethan looked at Issei. She looked back. Neither had spoken of marriage, had barely acknowledged the love growing between them, but the question hung there, unspoken, waiting. "We will think about it," Ethan said carefully, "and let you know." The pastor smiled. "Take your time. Healing cannot be rushed, neither can love. But when you are ready, the offer stands." By afternoon the bodies were gone. The townspeople had left. Only Thomas remained. He would stay another day. Make sure Ethan was stable. Make sure Issei was safe. Then he would go, would return to his own life, would carry the weight of what he had done, killing men, betraying his brother, choosing justice over blood, but he would carry it lighter, because for once he had done the right thing, had stood on the side of the broken instead of the breakers. That mattered. That would help him sleep at night. That evening, as sunset painted the snow gold and crimson, Ethan sat by the fire, arm in a sling, body aching, but alive, whole enough. Issei sat beside him, close but not touching, both of them watching flames dance, both of them processing, adjusting, learning to exist in a world where the threat was gone, where fear was not the dominant emotion, where tomorrow held possibility instead of dread. "I killed him," Issei said quietly. "I ended his life." "You did. Does that make me a monster?" "No, it makes you a survivor. It makes you someone who refused to be a victim anymore." She turned to look at him. "I do not regret it. You should not. He gave you no choice. You did what you had to do. Will I go to hell for it?" Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Then he shook his head. "I do not believe God punishes people for refusing to be murdered, for defending their lives. If there is a hell, John is there, not you." She nodded, wanted to believe him, wanted to think that justice and mercy could coexist, that defending yourself did not stain your soul, that she could move forward without carrying this as one more burden. "Ethan," she said softly, "Pastor Weller offered to marry us." "He did. Is that something you want to be married to me? Truly married, not just providing shelter, but choosing me. Choosing this." He turned to face her fully, reached out with his good hand, took hers, held it gently. "I see, I fell in love with you the moment I saw you in that collar, not because you needed saving, but because even broken, even bleeding, even defeated, there was strength in you. Fire that refused to die. I see that fire now, burning brighter, free. And yes, I want to marry you. I want to build a life with you. I want to wake up every morning and know that you chose to stay, not because you had no other options, but because you wanted to be here, with me." Tears ran down her face, but she was smiling. "I want that too. I want you. I want this life. I want to be Issei Coulter, to take your name, to build something new with you, something that belongs to us." They kissed then, slow and gentle. Two wounded people learning to be whole together, learning that love could exist without pain, that intimacy could be tender, that choosing each other was the bravest thing either of them had ever done. When they pulled apart, Ethan was crying too. "We will tell Pastor Weller. In a few weeks, when I can stand without wanting to pass out, we will get married, properly, in front of everyone, and we will build the life we both deserve." "Together," Issei whispered. "Together," he agreed. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft, peaceful, covering the last traces of violence, making the world clean, making it new, and inside the small ranch house, two people who had been broken learned what it meant to heal, what it meant to hope, what it meant to love without fear. The worst was over. The future was beginning. And for the first time in longer than either could remember, that future looked bright. 2 weeks passed like water over stone, slow, steady, wearing away the sharp edges of trauma and leaving something smoother behind. Ethan's shoulder healed, not quickly, not completely, but enough. The stitches held. The bleeding stopped. Doc Miller visited twice, pronounced the wound clean, said infection had not set in, said Ethan was lucky, said most men who took a bullet like that either lost the arm or lost their lives. But Ethan was neither most men nor particularly concerned with luck. He was concerned with healing fast enough to marry the woman who had saved him in ways that had nothing to do with bullets. The nightmares came for Issei in those weeks, came hard, came often. She would wake screaming, thrashing, trapped in memories of John's fists and the collar and the endless years of pain. But Ethan was there, every time. Moving from the barn to the house on the third night because leaving her alone felt like abandonment. He would hold her, rock her, whisper that it was over, that she was safe, that John was dead and could never hurt her again. Slowly, so slowly, it was almost invisible. The nightmares came less often. 5 nights a week became 3, 3 became 2, 2 became 1. And then miraculously she slept through an entire week without once waking in terror. It was not healing, not yet. But it was progress, and progress they had learned was enough. During the days they worked, together, rebuilding what the battle had broken, repairing bullet holes in the walls, replacing shattered windows, scrubbing blood from the floorboards until the wood was clean again. The work was therapeutic, gave their hands something to do, gave their minds something to focus on besides the weight of what they had survived. Issei learned the rhythms of the ranch, how to feed the horses, how to mend fences, how to read weather in the way clouds moved across the sky. Ethan taught her patiently, never pushing, never demanding, just showing her and stepping back, letting her claim this knowledge, this skill, this power over her own life. And she taught him, too. Taught him Apache songs her mother had sung, taught him how to recognize medicinal plants beneath the snow, taught him that silence could be companionship instead of loneliness, that two people could exist in the same space without needing to fill every moment with words. Thomas Broken Arrow visited once more before leaving permanently, rode up on a cold January afternoon, brought supplies, brought news. Judge Samuel Blackwood had been arrested, charged with corruption, with conspiracy to commit murder, with accepting bribes. He would stand trial in the territorial capital, would likely hang or spend the rest of his life in prison. Justice. Slow, imperfect, but real. Thomas also brought papers, legal papers, transferring ownership of Issei's 160 acres officially and irrevocably into her name alone. No husband could claim it, no court could take it. It was hers, her inheritance, her future, her choice what to do with it. She signed the papers, then looked at Thomas, this man who had betrayed his own brother to save her, who had killed for her, who had chosen right over blood. Thank you for everything, for being brave when it mattered. Thomas nodded. His eyes were sad but clear. I should have been brave years ago. Should have stopped him the first time he hit you. I did not. That failure will follow me forever. But at least I did something at the end. At least I tried to make it right. You did more than try. You succeeded. He smiled. Small, fragile, but genuine. Then I will carry that too. Carry it as balance against the guilt. He turned to Ethan, extended his hand. They shook, firm, respectful, the grip of men who had stood together in battle and survived. Take care of her, Coulter. She has been through hell. She deserves heaven, or as close as this world offers. I will, I promise. Thomas mounted his horse, looked back once. If you need me, ever, send word. I will come. Then he rode away, disappeared into the gray winter afternoon, left them to build their life without witnesses, without help, without anything except each other and the stubborn refusal to let suffering be the end of their story. That evening, as snow fell soft against the windows, Ethan practiced standing without wincing. His shoulder still ached, still pulled when he moved too fast. But he could stand, could walk, could hold Issei without his arm shaking from weakness. That was enough. That was all he needed. He found her in the kitchen, kneading bread dough. Her hands worked the flour and water with practiced ease. She had learned this from her mother, had taught herself to find peace in the rhythm of it. Push, fold, turn, push, fold, turn. Meditation disguised as labor. "You see," he said quietly. She looked up, smiled. That smile still surprised him. How easily it came now, how genuine, how different from the broken woman he had bought for $50 6 weeks ago. "Yes, I am ready, if you are, to get married, to make this official." Her hands stilled in the dough. She looked at him, really looked, searching for doubt, for hesitation, for any sign that he was doing this out of obligation instead of desire. She found none of that, found only love, only certainty, only a man who had chosen her every day since they met and would keep choosing her until death separated them. "I am ready too." They sent word to Pastor Weller the next morning, asked for a wedding, simple, small, just the commitment and the vows and the blessing. He wrote back immediately, suggested Valentine's Day, February 14th, 2 months after she had arrived, 6 weeks after the battle. A day built for love, for new beginnings, for declaring to the world that good could grow from ashes. They agreed. The morning of February 14th, 1885 arrived clear and cold, sun on snow, the kind of light that made everything sharp, defined, real in a way that could not be denied or forgotten. Issei dressed in the guest room. She had made a new dress, white, simple, cut from fabric Mrs. Peterson had given her as a wedding gift. It fit perfectly, made her look like what she was becoming. A bride, a woman choosing love instead of enduring pain, a survivor who had decided that survival was not enough, that she deserved joy too. She wore her hair loose, long and dark and free, no collar, no restraints, no marks except the scars, and those were hidden beneath cloth and healing and the knowledge that they did not define her. Ethan waited in the main room. He wore his only suit, black, a little worn, but clean, pressed. He had shaved, trimmed his hair, looked younger somehow, lighter, as if the weight he had carried since Sarah's death had finally eased enough to let him breathe. At noon they walked to the small church in Prescott, side by side, not ahead, not behind, equal, together. The town watched them pass, some with approval, some with lingering doubt, but no one stopped them, no one protested. The battle had settled something, had proven something, that Issei was not a victim to be pitied or a savage to be feared, just a woman who had fought for her life and won. The church was full. That surprised them both. 50 people, maybe more. Mrs. Peterson in the front row, Doc Miller beside her, Sheriff Morrison in the back. Farmers and ranchers and townspeople who had decided that maybe, just maybe, love mattered more than prejudice, that maybe choosing to witness joy was better than clinging to old hatreds. Pastor Weller stood at the altar, smiling. He had buried John Broken Arrow without ceremony, had spoken no kind words over a cruel man's grave. But for this he had prepared, had prayed, had written words worthy of what these two people had survived to reach this moment. Ethan and Issei walked down the aisle, no one to give her away. She needed no permission, no transfer of ownership from one man to another. She came of her own free will, made her own choice, claimed her own future. They stood before the pastor, faced each other, held hands, and Pastor Weller began. "We gather today to witness a miracle, not the parting of seas or the raising of the dead, but something equally sacred. The miracle of two broken people finding each other, of two wounded souls choosing to heal together, of love born not from ease, but from fire, from suffering, from the refusal to let pain be the final word." He looked at Ethan. "Do you, Ethan Coulter, take this woman to be your wife, to love her, to protect her, to honor her, not as property, not as obligation, but as partner, as equal, as the woman you choose every day for the rest of your life?" Ethan's voice was steady, clear, no doubt, no hesitation. "I do. With everything I am, with everything I have, I choose her, today, tomorrow, always." Pastor Weller turned to Issei. "And do you, Issei White Dove, take this man to be your husband, to love him, to stand with him, to build a life with him, not from need, not from gratitude, but from choice, from the freedom to say yes because you want to, because he has earned it, because love given freely is the only love worth having?" Issei's eyes filled with tears, but her voice did not shake. "I do. I choose him. I choose this. I choose a future where I am not afraid, where I am not owned, where I am loved, and I love in return, And that is enough. That is everything." The pastor smiled. "Then by the power invested in me, by the laws of this territory and the grace of God, I pronounce you husband and wife. What God has joined, let no man separate." He paused, then added softly, "You may kiss your bride." Ethan leaned forward. Issei met him halfway. They kissed, gentle, reverent. The kiss of two people who knew the value of what they had found, who had paid for it in blood and tears, and the absolute refusal to give up when giving up would have been easier. The church erupted in applause. Mrs. Peterson cried. Doc Miller wiped his eyes. Even Sheriff Morrison, stoic and professional, looked moved. The sound filled the small building, echoed off the rafters, declared to heaven and earth that this was real. This was right. This was love surviving against impossible odds. After the ceremony, they held a small celebration. Nothing fancy. Bread and cheese and cider. Music from a fiddle player who volunteered his time. Dancing. Laughter. The sound of a community deciding to celebrate instead of condemn, to bless instead of curse. Ethan and Issei danced, slowly, carefully. His shoulder still healing. Her body still remembering how to trust. But they moved together, found a rhythm, found joy in the simple act of holding each other while the world watched and approved. When the sun began to set, when the guests began to leave, when the celebration wound down to its natural end, they walked home, back to Iron Creek Ranch, back to the life they were building, back to the future they had earned. Time moved forward, as it always does. Seasons changed. Winter became spring, spring became summer, summer became fall. The cycle continued, indifferent to human joy or suffering, just moving, just being. 1 year later, February 1886. Issei stood in the kitchen of the expanded ranch house. They had added a room. Then another. The place was growing, becoming more than a lonely man's refuge, becoming a home, a real home, with laughter and purpose and the promise of more to come. She was pregnant, 7 months, carrying the child she had once thought impossible, the child John had beaten her for not providing. But this child was different. This child was wanted, chosen, created in love instead of violence. Ethan entered, saw her standing by the window, hand on her swollen belly, light catching her hair. She looked radiant, complete, everything he had hoped she could become and more. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Heavy, tired, happy?" He moved to her, wrapped his arms around her from behind, rested his hands over hers on their child, felt the baby kick strong, alive, proof that good things could grow from soil watered with tears. Boy or girl, it does not matter, as long as healthy, as long as ours. Ours, she agreed, always ours. The ranch had changed too. 2 more families had moved in. Apache families who needed work and safety. Issei had offered them both, had used her 160 acres to create something new, a community, a place where Apache and white lived together, worked together, proved that peace was possible if people chose it. She had also started teaching, sharing the herbal knowledge her mother had given her, the healing arts, the old ways. Women from Prescott came to learn, came to listen, came to see her not as savage but as healer, as teacher, as someone valuable beyond measure. The town had changed too, slowly, grudgingly, but changed nonetheless. Mrs. Peterson now sold Apache crafts in her store. Reverend Shaw had apologized publicly for his hatred, had asked forgiveness from Issei herself. She had given it, not because he deserved it, but because holding on to anger hurt her more than it hurt him. That evening, Ethan sat by the fire, looked at the photograph on the mantel, Sarah, his first wife. Beautiful, gone, but not forgotten, never forgotten. "I kept my promise," he whispered to her image. "I lived, I found purpose, I found love again. I hope that makes you happy, I hope you understand." He felt no guilt. Sarah had wanted this for him, had begged him to move forward, to not die with her. And he had honored that, had found Issei, had built a life that mattered. "Thank you," he said to the photograph, "for loving me, for setting me free, for making me the kind of man who could save someone else." He turned back to Issei, to the life growing inside her, to the future spreading before them like an open road. 20 years passed, a lifetime compressed. 1885 became 1905, a new century, new possibilities, new challenges, but also new joys, new victories, new reasons to believe that the world could bend toward justice. toward healing, toward love. Spring arrived in April 1905, warm, gentle. The kind of spring that promised good harvests and peaceful days. Iron Creek Ranch had become something remarkable. 10 families lived there now, a real community, Apache and white, working together, raising children together, proving every day that the old hatreds could die if people refused to feed them. There was a school now, small, just one room, but real, teaching children to read and write in both English and Apache, teaching them history from both perspectives, teaching them that their mixed heritage was strength, not shame. Ethan Coulter was 60 years old, gray-haired, weathered, but strong, still working the land, still building, still believing that every day was a gift and every moment mattered. Issei was 48, beautiful still, older, wiser, scarred inside and out, but healed, as healed as anyone with her history could be. She ran the school, taught the healing arts, raised her children, loved her husband, lived the life she had once thought impossible. They had 3 children, Sarah, named for Ethan's first wife because Issei had insisted, had wanted to honor the woman who had sent Ethan into the world ready to love again. Sarah was 19 now, studying medicine in Prescott, planning to return as a doctor, to serve this community her parents had built. Thomas Jr., named for the man who had saved them both, 16, strong, skilled with horses and rifles and the hard work of ranching, he would inherit this land someday, would carry forward what his parents had started. Hope, 14, named for what her parents had found in each other, bright, quick, bilingual in English and Apache, planning to be a teacher, to spread knowledge like her mother spread healing. On an evening in late April, as sunset painted the mountains gold and crimson, Ethan and Issei sat on the porch of their home, watched their children play with the other children of the community, watched Thomas Jr. teach a younger boy how to rope, watched Hope read to a group of little ones, watched Sarah ride in from town with supplies and news and the confidence of someone who knew exactly who she was. "We did it," Issei said softly. "We built something real, something lasting." "We did," Ethan agreed. "Together." She took his hand, held it. The gesture as familiar now as breathing, as necessary, as right. "Do you ever regret it saving me that day, taking on all this trouble?" He turned to look at her, gray eyes still clear, still certain, still holding all the love he had felt that first day and more, so much more. "Not once, not ever. You saved me too, you know that, right?" "I know." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun sink lower, watching their legacy run and laugh and live without fear, without the weight they had carried, free in ways they had fought to make possible. Issei spoke again, her voice carrying the wisdom of someone who had traveled through hell and found heaven on the other side. "People ask me how I survived, how I healed, how I moved past 6 years of suffering, and I tell them the truth. I did not do it alone. I did not heal in isolation. Ethan helped. This community helped. But more than that, I made a choice every day to refuse to let pain define me, to refuse to let what was done to me determine what I would become." She paused, gathered her thoughts, spoke words that would echo long after she was gone. "I am not broken. I was wounded. There is a difference. Broken things cannot be fixed. Wounded things heal, slowly, imperfectly, with scars. But they heal, and those scars become proof, not of weakness, but of survival, of strength, of the refusal to give up. Love did not fix me. Ethan did not fix me. I fixed myself, but they gave me the space to do it, the safety, the time. And that is what broken people need, not to be saved, but to be supported while they save themselves. Family is not blood. Family is choice. It is the people who stand with you when the world tells you to fall. It is the hands that hold you when you cannot stand alone. It is the promise, spoken or unspoken, that you matter, that your life has value, that you are worth fighting for. I chose Ethan every day. I choose him still, not because I need him, but because I want him, because love given freely, love based on choice instead of need. That is the only love worth having, and that is my legacy, not the land, not the community, but the proof that suffering does not have to be the end, that broken people can heal, that love can grow in soil watered with tears, that choosing life, choosing joy, choosing to believe in tomorrow, that is the bravest thing anyone can do. She fell silent. Ethan squeezed her hand. Tears ran down both their faces, but they were not sad. They were grateful for the journey, for the destination, for every moment they had been given. The sun set completely. Stars emerged. The children were called inside for dinner. Lights glowed warm from windows. Smoke rose from chimneys. Life continued, beautiful, ordinary, sacred in its simplicity. Ethan and Issei remained on the porch, holding hands, watching night fall. Two people who had found each other in darkness and built something bright, something lasting, something that would outlive them both. Winter no longer had hands that hurt. Spring had come, and with it, the promise that every ending could become a beginning, that every wound could heal, that love, real love, the kind built on respect and choice and the refusal to settle for less, that love could change everything. And it had. The end.